Welcome to a brand new episode of Starts at the Top, our podcast about leading differently. I'm Paul Thomas.
And I'm Zoe Amma. Our podcast exists to help leaders and their teams understand what they need to do differently today to prepare for the world of tomorrow. We started Starts at the Top as a podcast about digital disruption, but we soon realised that leaders were telling us about something even more important and urgent, about how traditional ways of leading had changed forever.
Our mission is to speak to leaders who are carving out new ways of leading, and we cover topics from emerging tech to inclusion, from remote work to mental health and resilience, and from climate change to AI. If it's about the status of leadership in 2026, it will be on our podcast.
We're not here for these shiny corporate case studies. We share stories from real leaders who have learned lessons and made progress the hard way. And our podcast is here to share cross sector ideas and inspire others.
In this, which is our first episode of 2026, we'll be sharing our conversation with Chris Sherwood, who is Chief Executive of the NSPCC. And we're very pleased to share that this is the first of two special episodes in which we focus our attention on the Online Safety Act, which has become very topical as we enter the new year. In our next episode, we'll be sharing our conversation with Maeve Walsh, who is Director of the Online Safety Act Network. And both Maeve and Chris occupy positions right at the heart of the challenge of how we keep our young people safe and hold the technology companies to account. And Zoe, this is a subject that's important to both of us as parents, and one that's hitting the headlines this week in the UK as the media regulator Ofcom investigates Elon Musk's X, formerly known as Twitter, and its built-in AI tool Grok, and considers whether it can be banned or fined under UK law for allowing the app to generate indecent images of women and children.
Yes, absolutely. We should probably say as well that we are recording this on the evening of Tuesday, 13th of January, 2026.
No.
And this is a really fast moving story. So there is a possibility that by the time this episode is out there in a few days' time, there may be further developments. But yes, I mean, weirdly, this is almost like we planned it, isn't it? Because this week of all weeks, with everything going on with Grok, everything going on with AI, which we're going to be talking about, all of it is very, very relevant to our conversation with Chris and also our upcoming conversation with Maeve as well. And this story in particular with Grok has been brewing over the last couple of months. And it reminds me a lot of what Maeve and Chris have both said in their respective interviews, where they've called on Ofcom to show teeth and to stand up to the tech giants. And this does sound like it's going to be the most consequential investigation that Ofcom has made so far.
And in an act of art imitating life, the new season of Industry that started on the BBC this week, which you and I are both big fans of, Zoe, is also focused on the Online Safety Act, with the action centering around a payment provider looking to cut ties with an OnlyFans type provider in the wake of a new government bill on online safety. It's, as you said, almost like we planned it, but perhaps it shows how seismic the effects of the act on the tech world might be.
Yes, exactly. And the far reaching consequences if you don't get it right.
You also wanted to discuss the Information Commissioner's Office, ICO's report on agentic AI and the data protection risks and opportunities that organisations should be considering as they explore the deployment of agentic AI. In layman's terms, looking at this article, it seems to be a timely reminder that amongst all the excitement and possibilities of agentic AI, that we need to employ caution in our race to use the tools and ensure that leaders know all the right questions to ask of their teams as they launch new chatbots and agents into their ecosystems.
Absolutely. And this guidance from the ICO is very much well worth a read. I mean, firstly, just to set the context on this, some of you will have seen that the ICO has shared some really, really useful guidance on AI over the last few years, really ever since ChatGPT was launched way back when, more than 3 years ago now. And their guidance is something that I've consistently referred clients to. I think it's really practical, it's really helpful. And this is very much more of the same. Yet, of course, feels like a leap forward because it's specifically focused on agents. So I have to say, reading this, I thought it was really well balanced. So obviously there are the risks that it highlights, the increased risks of cybersecurity issues that obviously come from deploying agents and the ecosystem that you let them loose in. But there's also some really positive suggestions around how agents could potentially help with privacy and cybersecurity as well, which was an angle that I hadn't really thought about previously. So it's really interesting to hear about that as well. And I thought the way this got reported in the press was really interesting. So whenever there is a big tech story like this one, I always like to look at what the press coverage says about it. And clearly, someone in the ICO's comms office was really trying to find an angle. There was a way in for people who didn't know lots about agents. So they had released a story about personal shopping assistants, which is a
Hmm.
really good relatable hook, but perhaps doesn't quite indicate the full breadth of the guidance. And I understand they were trying to make it weigh in and a bit of a news hook. So absolutely fair play to them. But it's really, really worth reading, especially if your organization is thinking of deploying agents imminently, or even if it's just on the horizon and you're planning for it in the future. It does give a really good balanced sense of some of the risks and also the opportunities. And a big thing here is really about design as well. So making sure that you're thinking about the overall workflow, why you're using agents, how you're using agents, the consequences of using agents, all the different steps that are involved, because this is a whole level up, obviously, because you'd be working with a form of AI that has a lot more autonomy and all the risks as well as the opportunities that come with that.
Yeah, and it does seem to me that some of my clients are racing to employ them onto websites in particular, and maybe not making enough or understanding enough of the process behind the scenes before they're making that leap. So I think it is very timely, and I will certainly be making sure that I understand it and can share it with my clients as well.
Brilliant. And then in other AI stories, I really like the story that you shared on LinkedIn, Paul, a few days ago about KPMG and how they are starting to rate staff on how effectively they use AI tools in their annual performance reviews. Can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, this was timely because I was due to go in and talk to a group of partners in a firm, and this story came out the day before, and it was pretty much tied to exactly what they wanted to talk about, which I think is this sense that they're leaping forwards with AI and not really thinking about the consequences for the business as they move forward. So this is big four firm KPMG, and it's moved to measure the effectiveness of the way that they employ AI as part of their work. And for me, this signals a deeper shift for professional services firms who, for a long time, have wanted to move away from hours worked and timesheets to to more around the value that they offer their clients through technology assisted and enabled work. So I think this is important because this positions AI as being less about shiny new tech gadgets and more about skills, mindset, and culture. And I think it shows that firms want to start rewarding people who use AI to redesign workflows, to build new tech enabled services, rather than just to employ AI to do the work themselves. I think it's interesting because a lot of the chat seems to be about individual use cases for using AI, individuals using it in the workplace, but not really seeing the benefit across the organization. And I think this starts to think about how firms like these can lift those skills, lift those experiences, and share them across their teams and ultimately deliver a better service to their clients. I think it also warns of a potential lost generation of professionals who missed this inflection point with AI. And I think we keep talking in the professional services sector of the real winners being those who blend human judgment, which they've become so well known for over the years, with embedded tools that their clients can come to rely on. So I guess a sort of an open question to you, Zoe, was do you think that hard coding AI expectations into performance reviews would encourage deeper experimentation and innovation in this way in the charity and public sectors?
So this is really interesting because I think what it speaks to is some of the comparisons I have seen with growth and digital transformation from the corporate sector over the years, probably going back at least 10 years. And I still remember a client who worked for a very big charity showing me some performance review templates that she had got hold of from, I think, a corporate organization where it was very much a case of you need to demonstrate how you're using tech or it's
Mm.
up or out. And I think it's much harder to implement that kind of thing in the charity sector because we don't really do up or out. Maybe there are some organisations that do, but generally charities have a very different kind of culture. And to be honest, that's one of the reasons I really like working in this sector. Nevertheless, you would be a fool not to think about the carrots and sticks in terms of how we could encourage and support and incentivize staff and volunteers to use AI. And I actually think that one of the best incentives is about learning. It's about bringing people together. It's about getting people energized around what they can do differently and how they can innovate. And for me, that is the ingredient X that we're seeing in lots of charities now, where in an age when you can't necessarily give people pay
Yeah.
rises or promotions, you can get them excited about doing things differently and freeing up their time when they've got an awful lot on their shoulders. So I think you need to look at a horses for courses approach, really. And maybe this works brilliantly at KPMG, but perhaps would need to be adapted for the charity sector and done in a way that really aligns with its values and its culture.
And I don't think we're going to see this in the smaller firms either, to begin with. And I think you're right. I think it's more about how we can think about investment, I guess, investment in your employees' skills that are going to see them develop a life skill that they are going to need in the future. This isn't going to go away. And I think showing that you're going to put that investment into your employees is important. And I also think probably when you make that investment into your employees, recognizing that it's a learned skill that they should be encouraged to use and be rewarded for using, I think is sensible as well. But yeah, I'm not sure you're going to see wholesale adoption of this strategy across the profession, but perhaps it's going to be something that those big top 10 organizations might be doing more of. So watch this space, I guess, and see how it plays out.
My final reflection on this story, actually, having another look at it, is that I do wonder whether it's going to create more of a focus on individualism in AI adoption rather than let's bring people together, let's bring teams together, let's bring cross-functional teams together to work on projects around this stuff. Because looking at it, it seems like you would be rewarded as a person who, it says here, orchestrates the most leverage rather than creates the biggest difference, which for me are very different things. And as we were saying earlier, we were talking about going back to the ICO guidance, the importance of um, workflows and processes and around AI in order for it to be adopted responsibly and ethically. And none of those things happen in isolation. You can't do them without other people. However good the tech is, change does not happen in a vacuum. So that, for me, is something that needs to be considered very, very carefully here.
Yeah, I think that's a very balanced view that we can take into leaders as we go in and talk to them within these firms. Focus on the outputs that you are getting and what you are achieving with AI, but make sure you're doing it across the board and opening up that access to everyone so those lessons can be shared across the business.
It needs to be inclusive. That's the thing. It needs to be inclusive. Otherwise, you're going to get people who, as you said earlier, do feel really left behind.
So now for our interview with Chris Sherwood.
We are super excited to welcome Chris Sherwood to Starts at the Top today. Chris Sherwood is Chief Executive of the NSPCC, and he joined them at the start of 2025. He previously served as CEO of the RSPCA, the world's oldest and largest animal protection charity. Chris has more than 20 years of experience in the voluntary sector and is a board member of NCVO and chair of the Charity Awards. Chris, it's so good to have you here today. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thanks, Zoe, and thanks, Paul. I'm delighted to be on the podcast today. So, yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming along. We've been looking forward to talking to you for a while. And it's such a good moment to be talking to you because at the time of recording, which is just at the end of October 2025, you are about 10 months into your role, aren't you, as CEO at NSPCC? And we'd love to hear how that almost first year in post has been for you. How's it been?
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, so I joined NSPCC back in January, which feels like a really long time ago now. My time at RSPCA feels like a really long time ago. And there's been so much great stuff. I mean, I've been so impressed with the work, the services, the campaigning, the education that NSPCC provides. You know, I've been on the kind of grand tour. So I've been from Aberdeen to Jersey, from Northern Ireland right down into the southeast, and I've been to North Wales, South Wales. So I've been all around the country, and I've just been really struck by just the commitment of our staff and our volunteers to the cause. We've got some volunteers who've been with us for more than 50 years, Zoe, which is
Wow.
amazing, and the commitment. But it's also been a challenging time as well because, like other charities, out there, we're facing some difficult financial pictures as well. So, we have been really sadly in consultation on looking at how we can reduce our costs, which has sadly impacted on a number of our, committed colleagues as well. And that's never easy to do. So it's been both a mixture of, huge interest to be out there and real passion, but it's also been a challenging time. And I suppose the other thing is, I really wanted to work for the NSPCC, and this is a cause, that's really close to my heart. I love my time in animal welfare, but I didn't have the best start in life. I was one of those children that contacted Childline when Esther Rantzen amazingly launched it back in 1986. And so being able to give back to a cause that's so close to my heart, growing up in an abusive household as a child wasn't the easiest start in life. So being back here, part of the NSPCC with my hat of being a leader in the sector on, but to make a difference to children and young people, that really gets me out of bed every morning as well to do this job. And so proud of the work that my colleagues do, even in difficult circumstances like we've been in the past few months with some of the financial choppy waters that we face as an organisation.
Thank you for sharing that, Chris. We really appreciate that. And it's so fantastic to see that such a wonderful charity is being led by someone who has got lived experience of the cause as well, because that must bring a whole different dimension, I would imagine, to the way you approach the work and also to how you lead as well.
Yeah, I mean, I bring that lived experience from my childhood, which is where my passion for child protection comes from. And also, it brings that real passion for me about ensuring that the voices of children and young people are at the fore. We've just been to the party conferences, and we did an event at Labour with, Bridget Phillips, the Education Secretary, and Liz Kendall, the new Technology Secretary. But we had a group of young people in the room who were talking about what their experience of being a young person is like today, and what they want to see from government. And I think that's really important because I grew up, in the 1990s when my first smartphone was a Nokia phone. It wasn't smart. I could send 10 text messages and play Snake, and my headache was like saving the lovely text messages from friends. And you think about what technology is like today. But for me, it's also about technology is going to be like in the future. We're at the start of the AI revolution, which is completely going to transform the education, the social lives, the working lives of children and young people today, but also has the potential to bring all the harms that we saw through social media as well. So yeah, I'm really passionate about lived experience. I bring my lived experience. Sometimes, you're in a room and you hear a story and it resonates with you. And I suppose the other thing as a leader is to make sure I've got really good support outside. So, I've had therapy, I've got counselling, I've got that kind of support network outside as well, because obviously this is a cause that's close to my heart, but also what really drives my passion for the NSPCC. And can't really believe, Zoe, I'm the chief executive of the NSPCC. I'm so passionate about the organisation, so proud to be here.
Oh, that's wonderful. I can really hear that passion in the way that you talk about the work, and also I think it's brilliant that you've got support outside of work as well. We've had a number of CEOs come on this podcast and talk about how important it is to get support, whether it's through therapy, whether it's through peer networks, whether it's just having some time for themselves with their friends and family. And we are big advocates of therapy on this podcast. I myself have a lot of therapy over the years. So thank you again for talking about that. And then coming back to young people and bringing their voice into the room as well, which obviously is such a key part of what you described there. We wanted to talk about the Online Safety Act and how that's beginning to play out. And one of the articles I was reading in preparation for this interview was talking about how Ofcom really needs to show teeth if children are not protected. So we were wondering, what would you like to see from Ofcom over the year ahead, and obviously the major platforms as well under the Online Safety Act? What would you and NSPCC like to see happen?
Keeping children safe online is a major priority for the NSPCC, and informed by what we've seen through services like Childline, where children and people have been talking to us about, whether it's sex extortion through AI of young boys, or whether it's, cyberbullying through social media platforms, or whether it's seeing harmful and illegal pornographic content. This has been the lived experience of the NSPCC over the past 2 decades. And so the Online Safety Act being passed, and we were a really big campaigning force, that was incredible. But as we know, like, legislation being passed is not enough. That legislation needs to be enforced. And Ofcom has got a really big, serious job to play in ensuring that the Online Safety Act is enforced. And, we've seen some good examples of them doing that with some fines, like of OnlyFans of £1 million. But what we want to see them do is really use their full range of powers. So back in the summer, we had the new codes coming in for children that opened up a range of new powers for Ofcom to be able to deploy, and we want them to use their full range of powers. Um, Ofcom can only work within the bounds of the Online Safety Act. We do think there is more the government needs to do around this. We need to build a regulatory framework for AI. AI is still a bit Wild West in how that's been deployed. There's lots of good providers out there, but we're hearing too many stories about AI and being used to generate child pornography that's been circulated on private messaging sites. And we're also hearing, how AI is being used in often some form of mental health counselling through open AI platforms as well for children and young people, and giving out advice that we wouldn't want them to get. So there's more work that needs to be done around AI, and I think private messaging, end-to-end encrypted messaging. The Online Safety Act is brilliant in that we've now got age verification for platforms if platform providers don't want to remove that harmful content, and that's a much more robust approach to age verification than we've seen in the past. But end-to-end encrypted messaging provides an avenue for illegal, harmful content which can't be distributed through those social media platforms to be distributed. And the difficulty with this is that we get into a debate around privacy. And privacy is obviously important, but so is keeping children and young people safe online. And I think, the thing that I've really learned about, and I've spent more than a decade on my career working around technology and social media and abusive relationships or abusive animals, or now around, harm for children, is that we sometimes want to shy away from what the harmful effects are. We like the good stuff and we want to ignore the bad stuff. And for me, that's where the NSPC's got a really important role to play, to ensure that the voices of children and people are heard here. And we're kind of celebrating the successes like the passing of the Online Safety Act, but also pointing out where some of these harms are. And for me, with AI, I'm really concerned about the potential to see some of those harms turbocharged. And I just don't want us to be here, 10, 20 years time of, another 10 years of children and young people talking about the harmful effects to Childline counsellors, and for us to wait that amount of time to put that regulatory framework in. So yeah, Ofcom's got a critical role to play, but so has government as well. And we had an AI bill in the King's Speech. Nothing's happened on that. And we're getting close to another King's Speech. We're on our second Secretary of State. We need some action, and we need some action now, really. So I'm on the soapbox, sorry. Very passionate about this.
Do you think it's tripped the circuit again, AI, a little bit? Because I think from where I sit, with the social media side of things, I think we, as a society, have kind of got to grips a little bit with the online hate and abuse, and that side of social media. I think it's something that we talk about a lot more often. But it seems with AI that conversation has sort of moved now further down the road. I'm not sure we're having the same level of discussion. If I think about my peer groups, for example, when it comes to our children's use of AI versus our children's use of social media, it seems like another conversation to have rather than another part of the same conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because we're having this conversation this time, and I imagine if we came back to the conversation in a year, it would look and feel different because
Mm,
how AI is coming into our economy, and coming into the workplace, coming into schools, into family lives, that is changing. I mean, I'm going on holiday in January, and I basically pulled together my entire itinerary using ChatGPT. I did it in about 3 minutes. It saved me the whole piece of work of being able to Google that. I need to book a couple of tour guides for some of it, and you couldn't quite press pay, but I could get pricing. I could find the tour guides, high end, low end, medium pricing, even the meal plan, for those couple of days on the tour. But in about a year's time, you'll be able to pay for that. And about a year ago, you couldn't do all that work through it. So we're seeing this change happen. I think the other thing, as you guys will know, is that AI, it means many different things to many different people. For me, you know AI at the moment has real potential in our organizations to kind of streamline processes and make us more efficient and better use our data. But the exciting part is really building those richer relationships with our supporters, and deepening those relationships by being able to really understand them and connect with them better as well. So I say that in the context of this because I think that how AI is coming into society, it's changing, from month to month and from year to year, and that will change. And I think that will shift the conversation. I think what I observe, like with my NSPCC hat on, is that the harms around AI are still really underappreciated.
mm,
We're hearing stories from children who are, I was talking to one of our childline counsellors in Leeds about 2 weeks ago, who told me the story about how a 14-year-old boy had contacted her through Childline and said that his image had been taken from social media and applied to a naked body, and he was being asked to pay a bribe for that image to be taken down. We're not talking about those kinds of harms. And that's alongside some of the harms that we still see through social media anyway. There's huge potential there, and but there's also those harms, and I still think that that's just underappreciated. It's just still not being talked enough about, and in kind of conversations in workplaces and around the coffee table, of what we're seeing there. Does that make sense? Where I'm coming from there?
So that makes total sense. And Chris, I've always found you such a refreshing voice on this stuff. And I think it's so important that we have a shared understanding and a sort of sector specific understanding of how these harms could play out for charity sector beneficiaries across the board. So I think there was a story last summer about how more schools were starting to encounter deep fake pornography, sometimes made by pupils. And I remember there was a youth charity that I was talking to at the time, and I said, "You need to be prepared for something like this playing out in one of your groups. So you need to scenario plan for that happening. You need to get stuff like this on the risk register because you're right. This kind of thing, massive societal shifts coming, massive potential to harm the communities we support as much as the benefits that you mentioned and tapping into those. So I think it's brilliant that you are really getting this conversation started and playing such an important part in it.
Yeah, and I said I'm really excited as a citizen in the UK of the potential of AI, and I'm excited as a charity leader about the potential of AI. We will be embedding AI in Childline, to really help us to be able to use our data more effectively, to really understand what the experience of children and young people are today. It's got real potential to really deepen our relationship with our supporters. So I can see the huge benefits of AI as we start to embrace it, going beyond just efficiencies in processes. There's some real potential there. It's just the harms that we see as well. And as I said, my concern here is around it still being a bit Wild West because we're at the start of this market. The providers. Remember kind of Friends Reunited. Remember Yahoo chat rooms. I am showing my age now. The companies, the big BMOF companies of 20 years time, they're the kind of minnows of today. But it's those on the fringes who are doing really stupid things where, regulation, and government needs to act. to really bring that under control. And I get, that for the UK government that's challenging because they want, we're the challenge from the US and all those other geopolitics things as well. It's going to take the UK government to work in partnership with Australia, with the EU, with Canada, with other jurisdictions to be able to put in that effective regulation and legislation, really. And I said what we're saying at the NSPCC is that we think there should be a statutory duty on those companies to really consider the safety of children as they start to design their models, not as an afterthought, as a kind of way to provide that kind of safety net really around the development of these technologies as well. Because we want the benefits, we just don't want the harms.
So there's definitely onus on the government, there's onus on the platform builders and creators. And then one of the questions we had was about the role of parents. We're still at that play stage, we're still at that exploration stage, but how should parents explore these tools alongside their children? And what sort of tools would you recommend that parents use alongside their children to give them the guardrails that they should have at this time as they're forming their own opinions about these platforms?
Well, I thought we might get to this question, and it's a really important principle for me here. And then I'm going to ask you both a question. Safety of children online cannot just sit on the shoulders of parents and children and people themselves. We've just lived through the whole kind of burgeoning debate about adolescence. And one of my real frustrations around the adolescence debate is a Netflix program for your listeners if they didn't watch it, huge back in the summer, was the debate often descended into parents need to be better informed, rather than technology companies should better amend their algorithms in the kinds of content that's served up to children and young people and ensure that illegal and harmful content is removed from their platforms. And I think sometimes the debate, we kind of go for the easy answer or shift responsibility onto the shoulders of parents. Now, my question for you both, do you know the safety features to keep your children safe through platforms like Snapchat? Because if you do, that's amazing because it's really hard to work out how to do that as a parent or as a user.
Yeah, so some of them, I guess, is my honest answer. And with Snapchat in particular, because that's the one you've brought up, both my kids pressed and pressed and pressed to have access to that, and both have access to it now. The payoff was that I have access to it too. And follow them. They're the only people I follow on there. I created an account, followed those accounts, and that's all I've ever done on there. And my experience as a passive user of Snapchat, it's on my phone and I watch my two children, is that the interactions that come from the platform to me as a male adult, I'm assuming it knows I'm an adult, I'm sure I had to put my date of birth in there, is quite astounding. Just in terms of what comes to me. Some of the sort of the prompts that pop up on my phone from bot accounts, from individual accounts and things like that to encourage me to engage more, I think are quite frightening. Considering I've never put anything into the platform, the only thing it knows about me is I'm a man and that I follow my two sons. But it did cause me to invest more time into that platform to understand what the safety mechanisms are in there, but I probably only scratched the surface and probably need to know more.
And they're deliberately designed to make it complicated for you to be able to work out how to put those safety features in because they want to draw you into the platform as well. And don't get me wrong, I've had fantastic afternoons with my three nephews playing with the filters on Snapchat. They are
Hmm.
so much fun. We gave my partner a complete makeover and made him into a movie star using filters. Like, they're hilarious. And it's a very great way to spend time. I am addicted, as Zoe knows because she follows me, to Instagram. I spend way too much time on Instagram, normally looking at cookery recipes, and I'm really obsessed with panda bears at the moment on Instagram, panda bear videos. I spend way too much time. It's great. I love it. But you're right. It's the content that's served up. And I just come back to this divergent experience, for us as, I'm in my mid 40s now. The access to kind of that harmful content was really difficult for me as a teenager. There was, you still had to tell your mum to get off the phone so you could get on the internet. you know, and the modem, dial up was, downloading a photograph. It's just such a different world for children and young people now. And it's how we can support them to enjoy the good experiences of the social media and AI and mitigate those harmful. But, we can't protect them from every harm, but mitigating those harms really.
Yeah, definitely. And it's difficult, isn't it? As a parent, even as someone working in digital and AI day to day, it's such a fiendishly complex landscape. And I'm very conscious with my children, and Paul, I know you've talked about this as well with your boys. They are absolutely several steps ahead of even where you and I are with tech, and you
Totally.
work in tech. It's literally our jobs. But our kids' own understanding of how to use these tools and how I'm sure to get round some of these guardrails is quite something.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And as I said, you can't regulate for everything, but it is about this point of principle about, it can't sit on the shoulders of parents and children themselves to keep themselves safe online as well. And there's much more that social media companies can do, technology companies can do, and also Ofcom. With its new powers under the Online Safety Act, I think we're all looking to them to really show some teeth as they show that enforcement model. And we've got some good signs so far, but we need a strong and robust Ofcom to really see, because the Online Safety Act it was a real world leading piece of legislation. There's a lot of thought that went into that. We want that piece of legislation to be a success, because it is the key tool that we have to ensure that, children and people have that enjoyable experience of the online world.
Do other countries have an equivalent?
Yeah, so you've got we work with our partner Common Sense Media, who are based out of California, and they're a big player in the tech space and keeping children safe online in the US. So getting anything passed through Washington is pretty tricky these days, but they've had quite a lot of success state by state. So you've got, in fact, actually the most recent piece of AI legislation was in California. You've got good legislation across the European Union, and again they're debating what their AI legislation should be as well, and then other jurisdictions like Australia, because we're all grappling with the same challenges and the same questions, really. So, we're not alone around that, but the UK has been one of the leading countries in that kind of online safety space.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's very heartening to hear, isn't it? Because I know that the Online Safety Act it's had a huge amount of scrutiny, hasn't it? As you were saying, and also it's one of those things where it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to absolutely mitigate for every single challenge that is out there. But the fact that it exists at all and there is now a mechanism which can be used is progress, isn't it?
It is, and I think, over the summer we did see, an intervention by Nigel Farage calling for, the Online Safety Act to be, repealed. And, I really hope we don't go there. I really hope that the Online Safety Act doesn't become part of, political football. Our hope at the NSPCC is that we just accept that as a settled piece of legislation, like we did with seatbelt legislation, like we did with health and safety legislation, like we did with, keeping your electrical goods in your house safe as well. Like it's just this sort of sense of, from the opposition to the act, that we can't have that regulation of the online space. We talk about the online offline world. That's not how young people think about it. It's all the world. I'm showing my age now, but it's how how can we say we want to regulate, activity in this part of your life, but it's a free for all when it comes to being on the internet. That I just find a really bizarre argument. I hear the arguments around privacy, but we talk about that in relation to how we use social media, but your banks see every single spend that you make, So I think it's just trying to ground this in a kind of more holistic view with those checks and balances, really.
And then in terms of AI at NSPCC, so we've talked a lot today about the campaigning role and some of the changes that you want to see as an organisation. You also mentioned about looking at AI at NSPCC to build stronger relationships with your supporters and to understand more about the data and insight from Childline's beneficiaries. Do you have any thoughts on how else you might be looking to use AI in your charity?
So we are in the process of updating our fundraising CRM for, do you remember Razor's Edge?
Oh, yes.
We're still using Razor's Edge. Um, and we've still got some software that's IBM enabled as well, and that really is kind of way, way back many centuries ago. So we're in the process of embedding a new CRM. So we've been through the joy of data cleanup, of large data files as we move over to a new platform. And I think that's going to offer us real potential to be able to really deepen that relationship with our supporters, because we know that in the world that we live in today, that personalization of experience is really important. That connection to a cause is really important. Feeling like, you're making a difference. So I see some real potential there. I think also, we're an organization that has a unique window into the experience of children, young people, through Childline. Last year, we had more than 160,000 contacts through Childline. That is a service that's open 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Our counselors are talking to young people all the time. In fact, when we're coming up to school run, it'll get busy on Childline very soon for the rest of the evening. That's a real window and to really understand what the experience of children, young people is like today. What are they talking to us about as well? And I think there's real potential to be able to use AI tools to be able to kind of utilize that data to tell that story about what's happening in children, young people's lives. And as an organization, we are a campaigning organization. We're an evidence-based organization, an organization that's really rooted in, young people's experience. I think there's some real opportunities there. So yeah, lots of opportunities, but I wouldn't come on your podcast and go, we've really cracked it. I'd say in your podcast, we're asking some really good questions and seeing the potential here and starting to embed that and learning like other organizations are doing at the moment as well.
Yeah, I think everyone is still figuring this stuff out, even if they have a roadmap and governance and skilled up trustees and leaders like your good self. Everyone is having to just continuously iterate and improve and learn. Because as you were saying, in 6 months' time, the technology will have massively developed again and there'll be some new disruption that we're all contending with. So looking to the future, I mean, you've always struck me as one of the most forward thinking CEOs in the sector, Chris. And I still remember the very first conversation we had. I think it was for a round table that civil society did back in the day. And you were at Relate. I think you were maybe a
Yeah.
year or two into post. And you were talking about some of the digital challenges that you were facing and also how digital was changing the world of relationships and having to explain that to trustees. And I remember sitting there thinking, this guy is really forward thinking and we need more leaders like this in the sector. Looking ahead now, how do you see the sector changing over the next 5 years? What's in your crystal ball?
Ooh, what's in my crystal ball?
Yes.
I remember that round table. Yeah, that was the digital transformation we did at Relate as well. That was that was quite a journey. That was, and persuading counsellors that they may need to engage in different channels. Um, the key argument we started there is we actually started with what was happening in people's relationships and how technology was transforming them, and perhaps the organization needed to transform. But I'm waffling as I think for your question. Look, I think it's going to be a challenging 5 years ahead for the sector, given the kind of global context, given the financial context. More financial pressure on charities with rising costs at a time of greater need. Um, what gives me hope, though, is that I think that charities, the social sector, has that opportunity to really build out the good society, one which is fair, inclusive, more compassionate, and to really offer hope and optimism in what can at times feel like a bit of a dark time whenever you read the press. We've had war in Europe, we've got the situation in Gaza, we've got tariff wars, all these things we read about in the press. And I think we offer some hope and optimism that a better future is possible, that, we can bring love back into communities. So I feel really, really passionate about that as well. I think in technology, I think it's going to be a real transformation of our sector, and much better use of our data and insight to tell the story of the difference that we make. We have millions of supporters as a sector, and to be able to deepen that relationship, so they will offer us more, because at the end of the day, we need more people at the NSPCC to offer us more of their time, their money, and their voice. Because if we want to keep children safe, we can't do it alone. And I think that AI and technology has a real potential for us to deepen that relationship. And there's some real potential around that, and to be more efficient and streamline some of those inefficient processes that we have as well. So yeah, but my main message, because I'm on your podcast, I feel passionate about it, is that hope and optimism that I think we can offer, that a better way is possible, I think is really exciting.
And with the technology side of things, you've talked about that landscape really changing across the sector. Are the other charity CEOs that you speak to, are they equally excited forward slash worried about this as well? What are you hearing from your peer group?
I think hearing a mixture of things. I think you are hearing some excitement. I think the work that Catherine Johnson has been doing at RVS with her new volunteering platform. If you see Catherine at the moment, she is super excited about the potential of technology to connect charities and volunteers, and I think that's a brilliant piece of kit and a brilliant investment for RVS as well. And she's not alone; other people are doing really interesting and exciting things. I'm really excited about the tech transformation program we've got on Childline as well. It's going to really improve that young people's experience and enable us to reach more young people. So there's just two examples. I think for some others are a bit, where do I start? It still feels very big. For me, these technologies are things that I use in my everyday life. So I think I bring that to work. For others, that might not be such a feature. So where to start? But I think you just have to start somewhere, don't you? And I think the thing I've learned, certainly talking to you over the many years, Zoe, is ask around and seek advice and don't try and reinvent the wheel. And I've always found that people have been really generous if I need to have a conversation about what do I do with this, or how do you do a Salesforce integration in fundraising? There's quite a few people you can talk to about that as I grapple with that at the moment. So you don't reinvent the wheel. But yeah, the more I learn about this, I'm excited by the potential. And I think the thing I'm excited about is that some of the new AI technologies come onto the market compared to where we were before. Like they don't seem super costly. Maybe you may maybe correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but when we were talking about new CRM platforms, they were high cost, but there's such potential for some of these tools to be able to offer better experience for our supporters and for our beneficiaries, and not big budgets in the way that we've been before. So yes, I feel excited about it. I think there's other people excited about, but I think there are a few people who are a bit, what's this going to look like and how am I going to make it work? But that's why I think collaboration and talking to others is really important.
Yes, absolutely. And Paul, you've got experience of that as well, haven't you? Hearing those different types of feedback from leaders.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think that the sort of the low cost of the tools, social media tools were open access to begin with, and that's what got us all on them in the first place. I think it's going to be the same with AI. That's they're opening up the models and opening up access to bring us onto the platforms and get us to use our data so that the platforms can improve and get better. But there's so much value to be had in some of the tools that have been around a couple of years that are just that little bit further on their journey. So I think you're right to be excited by it. And I think you've also made a very good start, by the sounds of it, by getting your data in order, because the AI dream is being sold to us through this reinvention of services, reinvention of the world that we live in. But the very sort of lowest common denominator is it will help us to improve our processes. But you can't improve your processes, A, if you don't know what they are, or B, if you don't have the data to back them up. So I think you're making some good steps forward.
Yeah, what you get out is as good as what you put in, really, isn't it? In terms of
That's the polite way,
the
yeah.
quality of your data. Yeah, there's a less posh way, but I'm in public, so I won't say that one. But yeah, you can probably insert metaphor of choice. That's the message we're trying to get out. A huge potential. One of the things that annoys me when I hear pushback from tech companies is you're talking about, young people are much more likely to have used OpenAI platforms than people over the age of 30 are. And not only that, they're not just your existing users, they're your future users. Like, you want that lifetime value from that engagement with them. So really hearing their voice is doubly important because they're more likely to engage with your platforms than kind of older people or middle-aged people are. And also they're going to be engaged with your platforms for a really bloody long time. So that's why really hearing their voice is so important. We've just done a really great piece of work with a company called Baringa, as part of our Child Safety Online Task Force, which has been building the business case for online safety. It's a really big study that we've done, and it's really powerful stuff about if you want to get market differentiation as a company in the market today, online safety is a persuadable factor for consumers. It really matters for them as well. It's on our website. It's a really brilliant piece of research, but it's really showing, challenging on the head, that online safety doesn't shift consumer choices. This study is saying it really does. It really matters for consumers. And when you apply an audience segmentation to that, you're both parents, grandparents, when you start to layer that in, it's really important for consumers. So this is not just important because of future users being and existing users being young people, it's also really important today for business. So yeah, it's a business issue that will give them market differentiation and business benefit.
See, this is why the voice of civil society is so important in shaping the tech products of today and the future, isn't it? So that sounds brilliant. And we will go and have a look for that and put it in the show notes. I think that will be really, really useful and interesting for all of our listeners. So thank you for sharing that. Our final question for you, Chris, is really about your own leadership journey. So you've done all these big jobs in the sector, from leading Relate to RSPCA and obviously now NSPCC. What are the biggest lessons about leadership that you've learned along the way? And is there anything which you wish you had learned sooner?
Oh, there's a million things I wish I heard last super sorry. I think my first 18 months as a chief executive, I was really annoying because I thought it was all about me and I didn't sleep.
Bless
And
you.
I thought it had to be in every conversation. And my God, I learned that lesson pretty quickly because it's really not about me. Look, what have I learned? What have I learned? I mean, I think, a theme that's going through this conversation is really listening and being able to ask for help. And really listening to what an organization is telling you, really listening to that external place, that kind of, and being able to take feedback and admit you've got things wrong or you do things differently, but that listening, and being able to seek help is definitely a leadership lesson I've learned as well. Collaboration, I always use the swan metaphor. In fact, it was Ruth Sutherland, who used to be my chief executive, who Zoe. She told me the swan metaphor, which is where you look graceful and serene above the table, but your legs are going like mad underneath the table. But what she said, the key thing to the swan metaphor is always know somebody you can call
Oh,
to ask for help. And I think I've prided myself that I'm really prepared to seek help. And if I've got a problem, come in, I've never seen this challenge before. What do I do here? Who can I call? To ask for a bit of help on this. So it's definitely that listening and collaboration has been important. And I think the final, just to be myself. I mean, it's why I've talked about my lived experience. We've just been having our really passionate campaign around equal protection of children for physical punishment here in England. So it's you can't physically punish a child in it's against the law in Scotland and Wales, but there's a defence in English law about reasonable physical punishment. That campaign really matters to me because I was physically punished as a child, and it was something I was very unhappy about. And my dad would say to me, "I'm allowed to do it under the law." So bringing that lived experience, that authenticity, is just really important to me. So yes, it's listen, it's collaboration, and it's just be yourself really, and bring that to work.
I really like those. And Chris, if I can just say to you as well, having had some brilliant conversations with you over the years, you always come across as a leader who is very grounded in who you are and that you're very comfortable in your own skin. And also that I know the kind of person that I am going to be talking to if I bump into you at an event. And that is a wonderful thing. You come across as someone who has a lot of kindness and is very clear on who they are and is genuinely authentic, before people started talking about the word authentic. So, thank you
Oh,
for doing that.
that's so kind of you to say. Thank you. And thank you for having me on your podcast. It's been a real pleasure.
Chris Sherwood, thank you so much. It's been a delight to talk to you as ever. And thank you for doing what you do. And thank you for doing it in the way that you do it. Thank you for coming on Starts at the Top.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much, guys. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Been a pleasure to meet you. Thank you. Many thanks to Chris for joining us on the podcast. I loved hearing from Chris about his deep lived experience and connection to the NSPCC, and very much look forward to sharing the next episode with Maeve Walsh as a companion piece.
Huge thank you to Chris. That was a brilliant conversation. In fact, one of the conversations I have enjoyed the most since we started the podcast. I always think Chris is so thought provoking. He's someone who balances huge ambition for every charity he's worked with an enormous amount of kindness and thoughtfulness. I have a lot of time for Chris. So, really, really pleased with that conversation. I will be reflecting on it for a long time.
Yep,
As always,
totally.
we really do appreciate that if you listened all the way to the end of the episode, thank you. You can support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to us. It really does help us reach more people. So if you've enjoyed what you've heard, please do share us with a friend.
Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks with our conversation with Maeve Walsh and a brand new episode of Starts at the Top. So thank you and bye for now.
Bye for now.